This episode of the Batify podcast is brought to you in partnership with ministryleague.com. We would love for more people to discover this show, so please rate and review us on iTunes or your podcast provider. Feel free to share on your social media, and please do subscribe. Enjoy. Welcome in to the Batify podcast. I'm Travis Creasy, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Ben Hayes. How you doing, Ben?
I'm doing great, Travis. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. Unfortunately, my wife Whitney won't be joining us with us tonight. She's dealing with some neck and back issues, which is never any fun because that's connected to everything else.
It is.
But it'll be just myself and Ben Hayes. And we'll be talking about one of Ben's journeys in his life, one of his times in which God has shown up. And it's kind of interesting because we've done our own personal stories along with some camp folks this summer. And we're going to kind of wrap that up a little bit tonight, at least for this go around. But also it's a little bit different because what Ben's going to be talking about is 20 years.
Exactly.
So we get a little more perspective on that. You know, with Whitney and I, we're kind of a year out, a couple of months out. And so we're still trying to work through things. And, you know, obviously you don't ever get over things like what we're going to talk about, but you do gain perspective. And so I've been really looking forward to this opportunity to kind of go back and look at some things, and I was a little bit a part of it, had some experience with it, and
I think you were more than a little part of it.
Yeah, but you know, it'll be interesting to kind of go back and see the perspective from 20 years out.
Yeah, it's interesting because you know, I didn't kind of realize that until last week, and it just kind of, I started doing the math. I was like, wow, 20 years. To the day, September the 23rd. So about a week ago today, I guess.
Yeah. So, you know, yeah. I've been looking forward to it. I know that obviously with you doing counseling, ministering for several years now, we won't get into how long that's been. But,
wow.
You know, the things that you can bring out of it now that you are this far removed, I think will benefit folks who may be listening, and maybe people that our audience know that may be going through something similar in the moment might can help and reach out to them. So,
yeah, unfortunately, this kind of stuff happens way too often, and you know, people are constantly needing to deal with, you know, tragedy, and just like with you guys, your story was such that, you know, it will be gone through over and over and over again by folks in the future. So I think this is why this is I hope this is why this is a helpful podcast to folks.
So Ben, go ahead and tell us a little bit about what we're going to be talking tonight, and we'll get this thing started.
All right. Well, about 20, like we said, 20 years ago, I had been in a relationship with a young lady. We were both pretty young. We met at camp and had dated. Both loved the Lord. She was probably stronger in that than I was, to be honest. But we did. We had a good relationship for a couple of years. And on September 23rd, 1999, she was on her way home from school, wasn't feeling well, and ended up having a car accident and took her life. So, you know, that was one of those things that I wasn't quite prepared for at that age. I'd had some loss, but it had been, you know, grandparents several years before, and a couple of people at church and things like that, but nothing that, was anything like this. And so it's just one of those tragedies that the whole community was sort of grieving over. We were at, you and I were at Freed Hardeman at that point. And so, that community was there around us and things like that. And so, it's just one of those difficult moments that you just don't prepare for. You don't know what to do when it happens. And you go through a lot of different things when that happens. So her name is Tabitha Jean. Many people know her from our community and the Savannah, Tennessee community. She was a student at Hardin County High School. Anybody listening to the podcast is familiar with Hardin County. Went to Maywood Christian Camp. I know there'll be a few that are familiar with that. And you and I both had been at camp with her. And
and I think you brought this up a little bit. It's something that maybe you didn't know about God before this that was kind of revealed to you as you've worked even over the last 20 years, or even as you filled out the survey, maybe something that came up to you that maybe God revealed to you about himself.
Well, I think as I get older, I realize that, I think all of us see things a little bit differently. And part of that is that, when things happen, we don't see everything. And God, somehow, some way, I think he does, and he sees the whole thing. And, through whatever happens to us, I think he's preparing us to help other people. And that, we read that passage, all things work together for the good. And I think some people want to read that as, all things are good to them who love the Lord. And it's not, that all things are good, but that God works all things together for the good. And that, I think, I hope, I pray that, when I counsel with people and when I help people, that I'm making a difference, that I'm doing something. And and some of that is absolutely in honor of Tab and, what we went through and, what I went through during that time. And the fact that it was, it was such a tragic event, but it, everything that we go through molds us into who we are. And so, whether it's good or bad, it's just a part of who we are from here on out. And so I hope that I, relay some of that. And I have to say this. I don't know when the appropriate, time. I kept thinking, well, I'm going to miss an opportunity to say this, but I do need to say that my wife, it'll be 18 years in May. So
that's awesome.
But when thinking about all of this, I can't, we started dating probably within a year of this happening. And in some ways I would tell people, be careful with that, because it's just one of those things where she had to deal with a lot from me. And
absolutely.
Because I was still grieving in a lot of ways. I didn't realize it, in some ways, but that's just a hard thing to step into. And just mad props for her for putting up with me and all of the stuff that I went through, even in the, a couple of years after we started dating and stuff. And, that she was really an example of, here's how you care for people and love people and help people through awesome. Difficult times. And so, I think I have to say that, because she absolutely helped me in a lot of ways to deal with the grief. And so even using the ways that she helped me to help other people, here's, this person who was,
isn't it amazing
caring and compassionate,
how God looks at us and goes, here's what you need when you need it, and I absolutely think, Kenya is a tremendous example of that, a person who I imagine is a really good listener. You mentioned how grief changes you, and you've mentioned that a couple of times, but has this obviously, I think the things that affect us, and you mentioned Lonnie, what he says, and then mentioning Kenya and how she was able to help you. How does it impact your empathy? Obviously, there are people who deal with death every single day. Um,
Well, I think it's. I mean, you and I both deal with a lot of things with humor. We like to laugh. We've been laughing together since we were, what, not even one probably.
yeah,
When we were getting in trouble together, and so I think a lot of times, we use that, and it's an important part of us, um, but it's also, these kinds of things I think help you come to grips with a little bit more serious part of life. And I think there's a lot of things that, I look at even 20 years, down the road, I'm still looking at a little differently. Um, Life is just, understanding life is a little more, short than we sometimes want to admit it is, that it can be at least. And I think grief changes you in a lot of ways. You just don't walk away the exact same. And you also, I think it's just, you think about the fact that, hey, this, I could die, I'm going to die. And I think, before that, you kind of feel invincible. You
yes,
feel
sir.
like, nothing can take me down. And I think as you go through that with people that you love, you begin to sort of come to grips with it. And that's, part of the grief process too, I think, is kind of understanding and seeing something a little different. So,
I'm gonna throw kind of as we wrap up our time together, I'm gonna throw maybe a mix of three questions here. But first of all, is there something that maybe on a daily level this has impacted you and changed how you deal with certain situations? And I guess the second part of that question is what would you tell someone who's going through that right now?
well, I mean, there's things I do differently. Little things probably bother me a little bit more than they used to, or at least, I mean, just I guess the little things of life. I know you and I have talked about that some. That once you go through something, you're like, what, this isn't that big of a deal. Why are people making it a big deal? It's like the
Mm-hmm.
little stuff that doesn't seem like it should be a big deal, because this kind of thing is a big deal.
Yeah.
Loss and sicknesses and things like that are a big deal. I think that's one of the things. I think one of the things that just, and I think it's helpful to share these kinds of things with people too, because I see people with anxiety all the time and things like that. And, to know that when I go to get in a car, I do have anxiety sometimes. When I go to travel long distances, whether it's car or plane, there's still a little bit within me that says, hey, something could go wrong on this trip. I go ahead and get on the plane, and I go ahead and get in the car, and I do those things, but I do have to kind of remind myself, look, things could happen, but kind of like the whole Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thing. Look, he's going to deliver me. It may be in life and it may be in death, but he's going to deliver me out of the hands of whatever things I do face. And so I guess there's a little bit of that. I guess on the other end of that is a lot of people who are going through this kind of stuff. Process all those emotions. There's still days, there's still things that come up every now and then that, about that or about other things where I just have to kind of go, okay, why am I feeling those feels right now? What's going on here? Like we said before, if you're sad or angry or happy, process that, talk to God about that, let him, sort of help you with those things as you go through them. Because I think he's big enough to handle it, and he made us to communicate with him when we go through that stuff. And one of the things I've shared a lot with this didn't come from this particularly, but a book that I read on prayer, and it was, that sometimes God says yes, and sometimes no, and sometimes wait, and sometimes more abundantly than we can ask or think. But one of my favorite answers to that was, but, when we pray, God gives us God, as we go
Wow.
through those moments. 2 Corinthians 12 stuff where, you asked 3 times for this to go away, or I asked 3 times for it to go away. And instead of answering my prayer, you reminded me that you were the power within me, that when I'm weak, I'm strong. And that's kind of held on, that sometimes people are going through tragedies, whether it's health issues or, they prayed for somebody to be delivered from something and it didn't happen. And people lose their faith because of that, or their faith gets, shaken a little bit. And I think the important thing to remember is God never said he would say yes to every prayer. And when we're praying, God healed them, and then they aren't healed, we need to understand what process was God taking us through during that, to help prepare us, to help strengthen us, for the answer. Because, he even told his son no, Jesus had to go to the cross, even though he prayed something, let this pass from me. So I think it's important to understand that, God does answer our prayers, but he doesn't always answer them the exact way that we want them. David prayed for his little boy when he was born, and he was weeping and grieving the whole time. And when the baby died, they were afraid to tell him. But when they told him, he said, "I'll go to him. He's not coming back to me, but I'll go to him." And so I think God prepares us in the way that we pray and in the way that we give to him. And I'm still learning this stuff, and I'm still growing from it. And there's still days that I don't understand it all.
Aren't we all? What are maybe some do's and don'ts, or maybe just things to think about for those of us that are trying to come alongside these people who are mourning, either things not to say, things to say, or maybe just how to be there and be comfortable being there?
I would say go back again. There's a few things here I think I would encourage. And one is, don't be afraid to just be there. Sometimes when people are there and they feel weird and they feel like they have to say something, then it may be uncomfortable for them and the other person, the person that's grieving. So just be there with them. Love them, encourage them. When they talk about being mad at God, don't correct it. Just let them express the emotions that they need to express. Let them be angry. Let them grieve. Everybody's grieving process is different. You hear people say, "Well, they should be over it by now," or this should happen, or people think this is the way it ought to happen. And by the way, the grieving process is not like some linear step-by-step process. I think a lot of times people think, well, you're going to have the denial and you're going to have the anger and you're going to have this. And once you've worked through those things, you're good. And that's not true. You may grieve kind of over and over again for a while. You may, somebody described it as it comes in waves, like you get these waves and then every now and then just this rogue wave out of nowhere sort of hits you and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? And I've even had that in the last year. Just there was a situation and something I found out about, and it was all of a sudden I kind of felt some of those things again. And, it was just random. 20 years later, you don't expect it, but sometimes it happens. And so I think it's good for us to know that. I think it's also good for people to just be aware that sometimes the things that we have said, and you can Google or look up, things not to say when people are grieving. And I think sometimes it's good for us to study that because, when you say, well, God was just wanting another one of his angels or, something like that, then people get this image of, okay, God just does what he wants and takes who he wants.
I'm really glad that you can't remember anything that I said to you at that point. So I'm thankful for forgetfulness.
I don't
and if
remember
you do remember,
any
just
of those
don't
things.
Tell me.
I don't
Sweet.
remember.
Awesome.
I don't remember, and I don't hold it against people who did because I've said them too.
Yeah.
But just kind of reminding ourselves to be careful. And I think another thing that people said that kind of irked me that doesn't have to do with a grief is, somebody says kind of the opposite of that. They'll say, well, so-and-so, God must have really been with that person because they shouldn't have survived that. God was with them.
Yeah.
And I go, well, what about the people who didn't?
Yeah.
And I know the answer to it, but I think when you got people who are weak and struggling, they
man.
go, well, God wasn't with my
Yeah.
person, you know.
Just want to take a moment as we get ready to ask the final question to our guests to encourage you, if you are in the market or looking to create your own podcast, to look at Anchor. That's what we use. As you listen, you may be thinking, if these two guys can do it, then anybody can, and that's absolutely true with Anchor. The best part is it's free. There's plenty of creation tools that allow you to record, edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. You can also contact and have your guests on from different locations or right there in the room with you. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you. It can be on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
To end the podcast, I'll ask you a few fun questions. What is your most rewatched movie?
My most rewatched, probably it's a toss-up, but probably you and I watched Dumb and Dumber and Tommy Boy more than anything ever
Or
in
anyone
our
should.
time, and probably more than anyone should. We're not advocating for such events, but we did watch those a lot. And then probably the movie I've watched more times than any is It's a Wonderful Life. I've owned it on DVD. I've owned a cassette of it. I think I had the VHS of it one time. I've got to watch it every Christmas just about. I don't think I've went many Christmases without watching it at least once.
Yeah.
I can quote most of the movie and talk about most of the main characters. And, of course, once you have kids, Cars got watched a lot. And Frozen got watched a lot.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I should be
that.
excited about Frozen 2 coming out, but at least it'll be a change of pace.
It's about to wear your life out.
What is your pet peeve? And do not tell how many times that I've done this to you.
You probably know this one. Don't slap me in the back of the head. That's just now everybody who sees me after this podcast is going to slap me in the back of the head.
Do not slap Ben in the back of the head. That's my job.
That's probably it. So
our Kenya's job. And then finally, what canceled TV show would you bring back?
Man, I really, really loved the show Lie to Me. And if you never saw Lie to Me,
I enjoyed that show too.
It was fantastic. It was like micro expressions. You know, this guy could read them. And I think it was based loosely on some FBI guy that knew all that kind of stuff. And then I really liked this show Timeless. Of course, you and I are history buffs, and you know they would travel back in time to try to, you know, do different things. Of course, along with that, before there was Timeless, you know what I'm thinking, right? The show from when we were kids, where they did almost the same thing.
Yeah.
Remember?
Quantum Leap, man. Yeah.
Quantum Leap, and that was the stuff.
Yeah.
So I like stuff like that. Go back in history, see if you can keep from. You know, I think it was less than about changing it, but keeping it the way it was. So kind of interesting.
Thanks for being with us on this episode of the Batify Podcast. Be sure to download the Ministry League app and get all of our sister podcasts, along with all sorts of great ministry material at facebook.com/Ministry League. Until next time, look for us at the same Batify time, same Batify channel.